The number of refugees around the world grew by 21% between 2021 and 2022. Experts say that number is likely only going to increase as the conflicts in Ukraine, Sudan, and elsewhere continue.
So what are the groups doing right here in Lucas County to help those newcomers looking for a better life? We are diving in the big story today.
According to the United Nations, at the end of last year, more than 108 million people around the world were considered displaced or refugees from their home country.
That's a 23% increase from the end of 2021, and that number, as we mentioned, is growing. Those 100 million refugees have been forcibly displaced as a result of persecution, conflict, human rights violations, or other violence. 62 million people are internationally displaced within their home country, and another 35 million have had to flee their country, making them refugees. 19 million new refugees were added to that number last year. Over 10 million of those people were from Ukraine. The UN says over half of the world's refugees come from just 3 countries: Syria, Ukraine, and Afghanistan.
According to the UNHCR, 70% of refugees flee to neighboring countries. Just 5 countries host nearly 40% of the world's refugees. Turkey hosts just over 3.5 million refugees. That number is right above Iran at 3.4. Colombia hosts 2.5 million, and Germany hosts just over 2 million refugees. Pakistan hosts 1.7 million refugees. And there are multiple conflicts around the world that force people from their homes every day. The war in Sudan has displaced 2 million people since April. It's a record-breaking figure. That's because the fighting between Sudan's military and a rival paramilitary force sparked a humanitarian crisis. That fighting continues after peace talks and ceasefire agreements fell apart less than 1 month ago. 500,000 of those displaced in Sudan have fled to neighboring countries like Chad and South Sudan. South Sudan is already stretched for resources, making life in refugee camps particularly dire. Nima El-Bahir reports.
This is Africa's largest refugee crisis, and you can see the conditions here for yourself. The people here are being largely ignored by the world. Aid agencies are doing what they can, but it is simply not enough. South Sudan is one of the poorest countries in the world. They barely have enough to feed and shelter their own returnees. And they're also being asked now to absorb fleeing Sudanese and other foreign nationals with limited support from the outside world. And it is almost impossible. With rainy season starting, what you see here, it's only going to get worse. So many of those speaking to us say that they feel a sense of humiliation, that the message that they're receiving from the world, from the international community, is that they are not worthy of support. And until aid arrives here in meaningful quantities, it's hard to argue with that. Ni'mal Bagher, CNN, Rank, South Sudan.
Meanwhile, Europe is facing a refugee crisis as well. That crisis highlighted by last week's deadly incident where a boat carrying hundreds of migrants traveling from Libya to Italy sank off the coast of Greece. Hundreds of people are dead and more are still missing. Greek authorities now facing questions after allegations that the boat that capsized after the Greek Coast Guard attempted to tow it. It's a claim that they deny. In an attempt to deal with the influx of people, many European countries have toughened border restrictions for migrants crossing the Mediterranean. The International Organization for Migration says urgent action is needed to prevent further deaths and says countries have a duty to rescue those who are in distress at sea.
Meanwhile, more than 40 multinational companies are pledging to provide jobs, training, and work opportunities for more than 250,000 refugees in Europe. The list of companies includes Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, and more. Experts say having a job can give refugees a sense of stability during the physical, psychological, and financial trauma that runs deep from abruptly leaving life as you know it. The company pledges will be carried out over the next 3 years.
So how many refugees does the United States take in each year? The U.S. has a refugee resettlement ceiling of 125,000 refugees per year. But according to government data, just under 26,000 refugees were resettled here in the U.S. last year. That number does exclude Ukrainians and Afghans who arrived under humanitarian parole. In order to resettle in the U.S., the refugees have to be registered as refugees by the UNHCR and must pass screenings. According to that Refugee Processing Center, the government site for admission and arrivals within the U.S. is one where they have a lot of applications for refuge and asylum. However, the U.S. is also the country with the biggest backlog.
Between October of 2022 and May of this year, the U.S. has admitted more than 31,000 refugees to begin new lives all across the United States. More than 1,000 of them from 32 different countries now call the Buckeye State their new home, and more than 800 of these new Ohioans are from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Nearly 150 fled Syria. Dozens more are from places like Afghanistan, Eritrea, Burma, Sudan, Somalia, and Iraq.
Now, there are organizations right here in Toledo that are working to help refugees and immigrants arriving in Lucas County. We're joined by Shane Lakatis. He is the Outreach Director and Case Manager with Social Services for the Arab Community. Thanks for joining us live. We appreciate it. Your organization specifically serves the Arab refugees and immigrants arriving here in Lucas County. So tell us about this process and what are the services that your organization provides?
Well, the process can be difficult, can be easy sometimes, but it all depends on how we welcome them when they come. As mentioned before in the story, it's very hard leaving everything that you know to come to a new place where your language is different, your culture is different, and everything is new. So our organization, we offer about 12 different service programs, from finding jobs to learning English to just translation of mail and correspondence and things like that, and health services that help people in that process. Our organization doesn't just want to help people become self-sufficient. We also want them to become contributing members of the Toledo community. So that's our ultimate goal.
How many people have you helped in the past few years?
I think our case load has been over 2,500 people, and they're not just refugees. We serve immigrants, asylum seekers, people from all over. We don't close our doors to non-Arab people. We'll be happy to serve anybody who comes, who has a need. But in terms of language, that's the language, Arabic language, that we speak. So being that Toledo, Ohio is a highly populated per capita Arab community, it's been a lot of people coming and needing our services.
And you mentioned some of the challenges when it comes to language and just having a place to stay. Let's talk about the housing aspect of this. How does your organization help? Are you relying on people opening their doors?
Yes, in many different ways. So we approach a lot of different LMHA. We work with LMHA. We work with apartment owners, people who are renting out their properties, and just saying, hey, you know, these are people who need help. They need a home. Sometimes it can be a loophole for discrimination, that, oh, they don't have credit, or they don't, you know. And this is why we can help vouch for them and show the income and show what they can do to stay in housing.
And finally, if someone is watching today and they would like to help your organization, what do you need?
There's many different ways. If people want to come and tutor, if people want to just get to know people, I think the biggest obstacle is just an open heart. Refugees, no one wants to be a refugee. No one signed up to become a refugee. And the best thing that we can do as a community, because this is where our grandparents came from, this is where our heritages are from. Everybody who's an American came from someplace else. So if we can open our hearts to people and make friendships with people, even that's enough just to welcome them as neighbors.
Well, thank you so much for joining us live here on Action News at 4. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And remember, you can watch the full big story on our 13 ABC News app. That is available as a free download in your app store.